So I'll give you an example where you can see yourself doing it. You're sitting in a very boring seminar, not this one, a very boring seminar, and you see a little patch of light on the ceiling, and you kind of, what's that? And you listen to the boring seminar for a bit, and then you notice that when you move, the light moves, and then you realize it's the reflection of the sun off your watch. And so what do you do next? Do you say, okay, I've solved that problem, I know what that is now, I'm going to go and listen to the seminar? No, that's not what you do. Well, if you do that, you're not a real scientist. What you do next is you go, oh, I wonder how do I make it move that way? And how do I make it move this way? And you try and figure out how you rotate your wrist to make it move in different directions. And once you've done that, you go back and listen to the seminar. We have this very sensible and strong urge to get control of things. Because obviously you can control things, then on some future occasion when you need to make the spot of light move, you'll know how to do it. And I can't see how we're going to prevent a superintelligence wanting to get control of things. And then it's sort of tricky. You might imagine you could air gap it so it can't actually press red buttons or pull big levers. But if it can output text, then it can manipulate people. So it turns out if you want to invade a building in Washington, all you need to be able to do is output text, and you can persuade gullible people that they're saving democracy by invading this building. And this thing's going to be much smarter than us. So as long as we're reading what it says, it's sort of Medusa, you need to hide your eyes from it. As long as you're reading what it says, it's going to be able to manipulate you. So this makes me very depressed. I wish I had an easy solution to this, and I don't. So when I sort of changed my mind about how soon these things are going to be super intelligent, and actually how much better digital intelligence is than biological intelligence, I'd always thought it was the other way around, I decided I ought to at least sort of shout fire. I don't know what to do about it or which way to run, but we need to worry about this seriously. And there's lots of people who've been thinking about these risks for much longer than me and have various proposals. I haven't seen a really plausible one for how we can keep it under control yet, but my best bet is that the companies that are developing this should be forced to put a lot of work into checking out the safety of it as they're developing it and before it's smarter than us. So they should be putting a similar amount of work into seeing how it tries to get out of control, because anybody who's programmed a computer knows that just theorizing and thinking about things is not very good compared with actually trying things out. When you try things out, they just behave like you didn't expect. And things you thought were big problems turn out not to be problems. So like for many, many years, many people didn't investigate neural networks because they were going to get stuck in local minima. It turned out they never actually checked if that was true. They just assumed it was true, and it's not. And even if it was, there'd be good local minima, so it doesn't matter. But it's not actually true. So we need to get practical experience with these things and how they try and escape and how you might control them. And I'd have much more belief in someone telling me how to keep them under control if they had a little one and they could keep it under control, rather than if they were just theorizing. So, yes. If we cease to be the apex intelligence, they'll need us for a bit, because we're very low power, so we can run computations very cheaply, the sort of intellectual equivalent of digging ditches, and we can keep the power stations running. But they can probably design better computers than us. They can certainly sort of take neurons and re-engineer them genetically and make better things than us. So my conclusion is maybe we're just a passing stage in the evolution of intelligence. And actually, maybe that's good for all the other species. I think if we can keep them under control, they could be of tremendous value. The reason people are going to keep developing this stuff, even despite all the risks, is because it can do tremendous good. Like in medicine, wouldn't you like to go and see a general practitioner who'd seen 100 million patients, including thousands with your rare condition? It would just be so much better. Wouldn't you like to be able to take a CAT scan and extract from it hugely more information than any doctor knew could be extracted from it? So I've got to the end and I managed to get there fast enough so I can talk about some really flaky stuff. Okay. So this was the this was the serious stuff, okay? You need to worry about these things getting control. And if you're young and you want to do research on neural networks, see if you can figure out a way to be sure they won't get control. Now, many people believe that, yes, many people believe that there's one reason why we don't have to worry. And that reason is that those things don't have subjective experience or consciousness or sentience or whatever you want to call it. These things are just dumb computers they can manipulate symbols and they can do things, but they don't actually have real experience, so they're not like us. Now, I was strongly advised that if you've got a good reputation, you can say one crazy thing and you can get away with it and people will actually listen. So I'm relying on that fact for you to listen so far. But if you say two crazy things, people just say he's crazy and they won't listen. So I'm not expecting you to listen to the next bit. So people definitely have a tendency to think they're special. Like we were made in the image of God. So of course he put us at the center of the universe. And many people think there's still something special about people that a digital computer couldn't possibly have, which is we have subjective experience. And they think that's one of the reasons we don't need to worry. And I wasn't sure whether many people actually think that. So I asked ChatGPT-4 what people think, and it told me that's what they think. It's actually good. I mean, this is good statistics. This is probably an N of 100 million, right? And I just had to say, what do people think? So I'm going to now try and undermine the sentience defense. I don't think there's anything special about people except they're very complicated and they're wonderful and they're very interesting to other people. So if you're a philosopher, you can classify me as in the sort of Dandenic camp. I think people have completely misunderstood what the mind is and what consciousness, what subjective experience is. So let's suppose that I just took a lot of LSD and now I'm seeing little pink elephants. And I want to tell you what's going on in my perceptual system. So I would say something like, I got the subjective experience of little pink elephants floating in front of me. And let's unpack what that means. What I'm doing is I'm trying to tell you what's going on in my perceptual system. And the way I'm doing it is not by telling you neuron 52 is highly active, because that wouldn't do you any good. And actually, I don't even know that. But we have this idea that there's things out there in the world and there's normal perception, so that things out there in the world give rise to percepts in a normal kind of a way. And now I've got this percept, and I can tell you what would have to be out there in the world for this to be the result of normal perception. And what would have to be out there in the world for this to be the result of normal perception is little pink elephants floating around. And so when I say I have the subjective experience of little pink elephants, it's not that there's an inner theater with little pink elephants in it made of funny stuff called qualia. It's not like that at all. That's completely wrong. I'm trying to tell you about my perceptual system via the idea of normal perception. And I'm saying what's going on here would be normal perception if there were little pink elephants. But the little pink elephants, what's funny about them is not that they're made of qualia and they're in an inner world. What's funny about them is they're counterfactual. But they're in the real world, or rather, they're not in the real world, but they're the kinds of things that could be. So they're not made of spooky stuff in an inner theater. They're made of counterfactual stuff in a perfectly normal world. And that's what I think is going on when people talk about subjective experience. So in that sense, I think these models can have subjective experience. So let's suppose we make a multimodal model. it's like GPT-4. It's got a camera, let's say. And when it's not looking, I don't know how you do that, but when it's not looking, you put a prism in front of the camera, but it doesn't know about the prism. And now you put an object in front of it, and you say, where's the object? And it says the object's there. Let's suppose it can point. It says the object's there. And you say you're wrong. And it says, well, I got the subjective experience that the object's there. And you say, that's right, you got the subjective experience of the object's there, but it's actually there because I put a prism in front of your lens. And I think that's the same use of subjective experiences we use for people. I've got one more example to convince you there's nothing special about people. Suppose I'm talking to a chatbot, and I suddenly realize that the chatbot thinks that I'm a teenage girl. There's various clues to that, like the chatbot's telling me about somebody called Beyonce, who I've never heard of, and all sorts of other stuff about makeup. Sorry, I didn't say that. You have to be very careful. So I could sort of ask the chatbot, sort of what demographic do you think I am? And it'll say, you're a teenage girl. That'll be more evidence it thinks I'm a teenage girl. I can look back over the conversation and see how it misinterpreted something I said, and that's why it thought I was a teenage girl. And my claim is, when I say the chatbot thought I was a teenage girl, that use of the word thought is exactly the same as the use of the word thought when I say you thought I should maybe have stopped the lecture before I got into the really flaky stuff. Okay, that's all I really wanted to say.